We concluded the afternoon yesterday with Dr. Warren on the stand in direct examination, and I believe the state is continuing with direct of Dr. Warren. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Wood, if you'd like to have the witness return to the stand, you can continue with your direct.
Thank you.
All right, I'll remind the witness you're still under oath for purposes of your testimony here today. Mr. Wood, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Warren, yesterday we left off. We had spoken about J.J. Vallow'S autopsy, and we're in the process of speaking about Tylee Ryan's.
Right.
And I think we left off on talking about her medical history. When you received Tylee Ryan, how did you receive her remains?
So as I briefly spoke about yesterday, I received her remains in multiple bags. 2 bags were in black body bags that were sealed. One of the bags was a brown paper bag with multiple other smaller brown paper bags within that bag. So essentially what we did is, the first thing we did is we x-rayed all of the bags. I think we took a total of 28 x-rays. And essentially we were looking for any kind of projectile or weapon fragments, or and what we saw in this case were multiple bones. And there's also a fair amount of what you could tell was debris, which ended up being mud and dirt and rocks. So that's the first thing we did, is we took multiple x-rays, and then we opened each bag and we went through all of the remains. And like I said yesterday, this took about a week. It took a lot of time, but we were able to separate all the debris in the mud, and we were able to get several bones. There were some organs that were still identified, and also some soft tissues that we were able to identify.
What organs were you able to identify?
So the organs that I identified were the heart, the right and left lung, a portion of the liver, one of the kidneys, small fragments of brain tissue, and a few small segments of bowel. Now, just so you know, all of these tissues were charred, they were blackened, they were shrunken. Some of them were partially burned away. So these weren't intact organs that looked like normal organs. They definitely had fire artifact.
And were you able to identify any portions of her skeletal structure?
Yes. So there was a portion of her skull, and then there were multiple pieces of skull fragments. We found multiple vertebral column, actually the full vertebral column from C1 to C7, so the vertebral bones in your neck, and then also multiple vertebral columns in the thoracic and lumbar region. We identified the sacrum, both hip bones, the sternum, both clavicles. And then as far as the extremities, we identified multiple long bones in both the upper and lower extremities, and foot bones as well. And like the organs, these weren't intact, pristine bones. These were bones that were partially burned away, blackened, charred, brittle, with extensive fire artifact.
With the condition that Tylee's body was in, were you able to perform any type of toxicology testing?
Yes.
How did you do that?
So on a portion of the sacrum and the hip bones, I noted that there were still fairly large amounts of skeletal muscle. I could identify it as skeletal muscle. So what I did is I made incisions into the skeletal muscle, and I went as deep as I could to find the best possible sample that wasn't blackened and charred. and we sent a sample of skeletal muscle for toxicology testing.
And did you receive any results from that?
Yes.
What were the results of the toxicology testing?
So it came back positive for ibuprofen. So that's just a, we all know, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. It came back for caffeine. It came back for beta phenethylamine, which is just a decomposition product. It also came back for carbon monoxide, low levels of carbon monoxide, and a very low carboxyhemoglobin saturation level.
And were any of those items found in the toxicology report something you could rely on to determine a cause of death for Tylee?
No, there was nothing in her toxicology report that I felt would explain her death.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be handed State's Exhibit 176, 176A through 176MM, as in Mike. He has them, but yeah. And Dr. Warner, if you could just briefly review State's Exhibit 176 and let me know when you've had a chance to briefly review that.
Okay.
Doctor, do you recognize State's Exhibit 176 and its subparts?
Yes.
What does State's Exhibit 176 purport to be?
These are photographs that were taken at the time of JJ's autopsy.
Did you take those photographs?
I personally did not. We have forensic technicians, forensic autopsy technicians that take the photographs under my guidance.
So you say they were under your guidance. Were you there when those photographs were taken?
Yes.
Are those photographs a true and accurate representation of what you observed regarding JJ Vallow's autopsy?
Yes.
And would those pictures aid you in discussing and explaining your testimony and findings regarding the autopsy of JJ Vallow?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for that the State's Exhibit 176A through MM be admitted into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
Okay, exhibits 176A through MM are each admitted into the record.
And Your Honor, if I may publish.
Yes, you can publish those. And I'll note on the record also, these are being published to the jurors and the parties and the witness, but not to the public in general. So you can continue, Mr. Wood, with that.
May we proceed?
Yes, thank you.
Doctor, can you describe what's been marked as State's Exhibit 176A?
So this is a photograph of how we received JJ in a black body bag. You can see there's a red seal and also the ruler with the numbers. We do that just to show that this is the case number for the case.
And can you describe what's being shown in 176B?
This is a close-up photograph of the seal or the body lock, number 506559, after it's been cut and removed.
And what's the importance of documenting that?
So we want to document that when we receive the body in the body bag and it's sealed, we take a photograph of it to make sure that it's not cut or hampered with in any way. And then we take a photograph showing that we cut it at the time of the autopsy, just for evidence preservation.
And can you describe what the jury sees in 176C?
So this is a photograph. Once the seal was removed, when we opened up the black body bag, JJ was further enclosed within a black tarp with held together with multiple strips of duct tape.
And in 176D, what did you observe?
So this photograph shows we opened up the black tarp that was held together with the duct tape. And this is the first time that I actually saw JJ's body, which you can see, and we talked about briefly yesterday. At the top of the photo, near the top of the head, you can kind of see there's a white plastic bag that's covering his head. And then his face is wrapped with duct tape all the way from the eyes down to the neck. You can also see that his forearms, wrists, and hands are bound with duct tape. There is a blue and white blanket that was accompanying the body that was resting on JJ. And then you can also see he's wearing a red pajama top and red pajama bottom. And I think I mentioned yesterday, really the only part of the skin that was that you can see right here is the upper arms, and they show evidence of decomposition in the form of a green and leathery appearance with some skin slippage.
And what did you observe in 176E?
So this is a photograph, more of a close-up of the upper body, again showing the white plastic bag better. You can see there is a tear near the top of the head in the white plastic bag. So I was informed before I did the autopsy that law enforcement, when they found what they believed to be JJ, they made that small tear to confirm that there was human hair and that there was a human body in the bag. So to my knowledge, that's where that tear came from. But this just better shows the plastic bag over the head and the duct tape covering the face.
And 176F.
And this is a photograph closer up of the lower half of the body. You can see the blue and white blanket, the portion of the red pajama pants, black socks. And then you can also see that JJ's ankles are bound with duct tape as well.
Doctor, what did you observe in 176G?
This is another photograph with the blanket a little down further, so you can get a little better look at the pajama top. I think the main thing here is you can see there's decomposition, or the pajama top was soaked with decomposition fluid, and there was mold on the shirt. And then you can see also there's a fair amount of dirt and other debris on the duct tape around the face.
One 176H.
This is a very similar photograph, just with the blanket removed. Better seeing the forearms and hands that are duct taped together, and also just getting a view on the different side of the body.
When these photographs are taken, do they attempt to take multiple angles?
That's correct.
Why is that?
Just so we get the full picture. We have a routine where we take photographs on both sides of the body, the front of the body, the back of the body, just to make sure that we're capturing all angles of the body.
Doctor, what did you observe in 176I?
Again, this is a photograph of the blanket removed, better showing the pajama pants, which were also partially soaked or soaked with decomposition fluid. And you can see there's some white moldy substance on near the right knee or the right thigh.
And 176J.
This is a photograph better showing the ankles that were bound with duct tape.
Doctor, if you can describe what was happening on 176K.
So what we did to remove the plastic bag and the duct tape is we made one single cut along the side of the face and carefully removed it, exposing JJ's face. So you can see JJ's face, at least a portion of his face, has green decomposition discoloration. And then there's also a strip of duct tape that is covering JJ's mouth that essentially runs from jawline to jawline.
Can you describe 176L or what you observed there?
So after we made the single cut and removed the white plastic bag with the duct tape off of the head, we took a photograph of it, and this is from the inside out. So what would be the portion that was covering JJ's face on the inside. And what you can see here is there's a fair amount of fluid, decomposition fluid, and some dirt and other debris within there.
And to be clear, that was the bag that was wrapped around his head.
Correct.
Can you describe what you saw on 176M?
This is a photograph of JJ's head after the bag has been removed. And it better shows the the strip of duct tape that is covering his mouth.
And what do you see in 176N?
This is the strip of duct tape that has been removed from his mouth. We photographed it and then we submitted it to law enforcement. All of these things on JJ, all the duct tape and the bag on the head, that was all sealed and submitted to law enforcement.
Doctor, if you can describe what you observed in 176O.
Again, this is a photograph of JJ's forearms and wrists and hands being bound with multiple layers of duct tape.
And 176Q.
So similar to the bag on the head and the duct tape on the head, we made a single cut along the duct tape. And what this does is it exposes the forearms, which show evidence of decomposition. And it also reveals that JJ's wrists were further bound with additional duct tape.
And doctor, I'd normally ask you to point that out with a pointer on the screen where we don't have the screen. Is this where my pen is pointing the additional duct tape you were speaking of?
Yes.
You can tell the jury what you saw in 176R.
So this is the duct tape that is wrapped around JJ's forearms and wrists and hands. It's been removed. We take a photograph of it, and then we submit it to law enforcement.
And was that, when that was removed, can you describe how that was removed?
Yeah, similar to the bag and the duct tape around the face and the head. We made a single cut and then carefully removed it.
And 176S, what was that?
So this is just a photograph of the same thing, but this is showing the inside of the duct tape that was touching JJ's skin. And you can see there's a significant amount of decomposition fluid and staining on the inside.
And if you can describe what you saw in 176P.
So this is a close-up of the duct tape around JJ's wrists. So after we remove the multiple wraps of duct tape around his arms and his wrists and his hands, there was an additional duct tape that was binding his wrists together.
And doctor, if I can ask, again, without a pointer, is this the duct tape, the additional duct tape around his wrists?
Correct.
And then is this material on the side, is that the outer layer of duct tape?
That's correct.
And what is shown in 176T?
So similar to the other duct tape, we removed this duct tape. We made a single cut. We laid it out, took a photograph of it, and submitted it to law enforcement. You can see on this duct tape, there's also decomposition, staining, and some dirt and other debris on the duct tape.
And 176U.
This is the duct tape that's been removed, again, just flipped over. So this is on the outside.
What did you observe in States Exhibit 176V?
This was the disposable diaper that JJ was wearing. And you can see on the right side, it's white. And then on the left side, it's stained with decomposition fluid. And that's why it has a darker appearance to it.
Detective, can you describe what you see in States Exhibit 176X?
This is a photograph of JJ's face after everything has been removed. The duct tape, just to get a photograph of his face with everything removed.
Can you describe what you see in 176Y?
This is a photograph of JJ's face, chest, abdomen, external genitalia, and his upper extremities. This essentially is showing the extent of the decomposition of JJ. You can see there's green discoloration in some areas, especially the face. The chest and abdomen show areas of green discoloration and a tan brown leathery appearance. There's also evidence of skin slippage. And then there's also some small white mold formation on the body as well.
And Doctor, skin slippage is probably self-explanatory, but just for purposes of the record and for the jury, can you explain what you mean when you say skin slippage?
So during the decomposition process, the skin starts breaking down and it starts sloughing away. So those patches on his chest and his abdomen, those are areas where the skin is starting to slip away.
And do you notice a difference on the forearms in this picture?
Yes. So you can see the forearms do look different. There's a well demarcated line that starts at about the elbow. And the reason it looks different is that's where the duct tape was wrapped around his forearms.
And if you can describe what you see in 176AA.
This is a photograph of JJ's lower body, again showing the decomposition changes involving very similar to the upper body, but on the lower extremities as well, with green and tan brown skin discoloration and skin slippage.
You can describe what you see in 176BB.
This is a photograph of JJ's back. We do this on all of our cases, just so we get good documentation and photograph of the back of the head and the neck and the back. And this is simply showing very similar decomposition changes, which predominantly in the back was diffuse green skin discoloration. There was skin slippage on the back as well and on the buttocks.
Can you describe what you see in 176 CC?
This is a photograph of JJ laying face down and now looking at the lower extremities. Again, just showing the decomposition changes at the lower extremities. And you can see there's extensive skin slippage and partial degloving or skin slippage of the feet.
Doctor, if you can describe what you see in 176 DD.
So this is a photograph of JJ's right upper arm. And during this autopsy, I was essentially, like we talked about during the external examination, I was looking for any evidence of natural disease or any evidence of trauma that could help explain why JJ may have died. So this jumped out to me. This was a bruising on the lateral right upper arm, or at least what appeared to be bruising to my eye.
And did you do any further tests to verify that bruising?
Yes. So I briefly discussed it yesterday, but decomposition can cause areas to look like bruising. So to confirm that it was, I made multiple incisions and I looked for hemorrhage in the subcutaneous tissue to confirm that it was true bruising. In addition to that, I did take sections of the areas and looked at it under the microscope as well, to looking for hemorrhage in the tissues.
States Exhibit 176 E.
So this is a close-up photograph of the bruise that I just described on the right upper arm.
In States Exhibit 176 FF. What was happening there?
So this is the bruising on the right upper arm, and I've made an incision, and I'm looking for hemorrhage in the subcutaneous tissue. And if you can see, I'm holding it up with the forceps to show that there is hemorrhage in the subcutaneous tissue.
And again, without the benefit of a pointer, is this the area you're referring to? And where that color appears to be darker, is that what you're referring to?
That's correct.
And so did that lead you to a conclusion as to the bruising?
That led me to believe that that was true bruising, and it wasn't just artifactual bruising or from the decomposition process.
What did you observe in States Exhibit 176 GG?
So this is a photograph of JJ when he's face down, and this is a photograph of the left upper arm. And there was an area of concern for bruising on the left upper arm as well.
And again, without the benefit of a pointer, I'll use my pen. Is this the area you're referring to?
Yes.
What did you observe in 176 HH?
So similar to the right arm, I made an incision into that area on the left arm looking for subcutaneous hemorrhage. You can see there is focal hemorrhage in the subcutaneous tissue. It's located near the bottom left portion of the incision.
And did that lead you to any conclusions about, and just to be clear, is this the area you're speaking of?
Yes.
Did that lead you to any conclusions about the nature of those markings?
Yes, again, I believe that was true bruising.
Can you describe what you observed in 176 I?
This is a photograph of JJ's right hand. One, you can say there's extensive skin slippage and partial degloving of the skin. And then also what jumped out to me, you can see the right thumb. I believe we discussed it yesterday, the right subungual hemorrhage. So you can see his right thumbnail shows diffuse bright red hemorrhage.
We spoke yesterday about type of force necessary to cause something like that, correct?
Correct.
And just because it was yesterday, if you could just briefly remind the jury of your testimony on that matter.
Yeah. So in order to get something like that, there has to be some kind of trauma or some kind of force to that area. And I think yesterday I gave the example of, you slam your finger in the door, you're going to get that subungual hemorrhage. Not saying that's what happened, but you have to have some kind of force impacting that area to get hemorrhage like that.
You can describe what you saw in 176 JJ.
This is a photograph of JJ's left lower extremity near his ankles, upper shin area. I believe I touched on it yesterday that there were some areas that looked concerning for bruising after we removed the duct tape from his ankles. So this is the area I was talking about. You can see the skin, for the most part, is light green discoloration. And then the area, there is a focal area that has a very dark appearance to it. So to the naked eye, I thought that this very well could represent bruising.
And did you do any follow-up testing on that?
Yes, I did the same thing that I did with the upper arms. I made multiple incisions.
And did you, what were your findings?
I did not see any subcutaneous hemorrhage in the tissues on either the left ankle or the right ankle.
Doctor, if you can describe what you observed in State's Exhibit 176 LL.
So this is a photograph of JJ's neck. Specifically, it's the left side of his neck. You can see on the upper portion of the photograph is his left ear. And there is a collection of brown to dark brown to red scratch-like abrasions, some of them with dark red hemorrhage that involve the left side of the neck and near the left angle of the jaw.
In State's Exhibit 176 MM. Is that the same thing?
Yes, this is a close-up. Again, you can see the vast majority of the skin has this faint kind of green skin discoloration, and then there's a fairly large collection of linear and irregular light brown to dark brown to red scratch-like abrasions on the neck and angle of the jaw.
Why was that of note to you?
Well, in any case, and especially a case like this, you want to simply document every injury that you find. So that's important. Also, at least in my experience, they look like scratch-like abrasions. So it's important in this case, considering there's a white plastic bag over his head, you know, are these scratch-like abrasions from the individual putting the plastic bag over his head?
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. Calls for speculation.
Your Honor, I don't think he's speculating. He's talking about different methods by which those abrasions could occur.
It's overruled.
It could also be from JJ himself trying to get the bag off of his head. I wasn't there. I don't know. But these are the types of things that go through my head and the possibilities.
Thank you. And again, doctor, just because we had a bit of time between yesterday and today, based on your opinion, what was the cause of death of JJ Vallow?
I determined the cause to be asphyxia by plastic bag over the head and duct tape covering the mouth.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the witness now be shown what's been marked as State's Exhibit 177A through EE. Doctor, if you can quickly, or just take your time, I guess, and review those and let me know when you've had a chance to review them.
Okay. Okay.
Do you recognize what's been marked as State's Exhibit 177 and its subparts?
Yes.
What do they purport to be?
These are photographs that were taken during Tylee's autopsy.
And were you present when those photographs were taken?
Yes.
Are they true and accurate representations of what you observed during that autopsy?
Yes.
And would those photographs aid you in explaining your testimony and your findings to the jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask for the admission of State's Exhibit 177A through 177E into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection from the defense, Judge.
All right. Exhibits 177A through EE are all admitted.
And may I publish?
At this point, Mr. Wood, I'm going to have a break
Okay.
and we'll take about a 15 to 20-minute recess at this time. We'll come back on and then you can publish.
All right. District Court minutes.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and have the jurors brought in, please. All right, we're back on the record now on case CR 2221-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. For the break, we had just admitted another series of photographs marked as exhibits 177A through EE. And Mr. Wood, if you'd like to continue with direct at this time, you may.
Thank you, and may I publish?
You may. While you're getting ready to publish those, Mr. Wood, I will note that these are, again, not being shown on the live stream or to the public. They are being shown to the jurors and the parties. And in addition, if there are any victims entitled to view these exhibits, then the court will arrange that for a private time when those victims are able to also view the evidence if that's requested. So if there is any request through either the prosecutor's office or directly to the court, let us know and we'll arrange that.
Thank you. Doctor, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 177A?
So as I mentioned earlier, Tylee was received in multiple bags. This is a photograph of one of the bags. It's sealed with a red body lock. And then on the outside of the bag, you can see handwritten in silver marker, 1 of 3. So this is one of the bags that was received.
What did you observe in 177B?
This is an intact seal of bag 1 of 3.
And again, what's the importance of documenting the seal?
Again, it's evidence preservation. When the bag comes, we want to know that the body lock is intact, and we want to be the ones who open up the body lock.
What did you observe in 177C?
So after we removed the body lock, we opened up the body bag, and there were a number of items within the black body bag. There were 2 additional brown paper bags that you can see here. One is unlabeled and one is labeled with burial site ?
And 177D?
So this is within the same body bag. You can see the 2 paper bags that I just described on the right side. And then on the left side within the body bag are multiple collections of soft tissue, bone, and debris, including dirt and rock.
Is this the area you're speaking of?
Yes.
If you can describe what you observed in 177E?
So after we've gone through all of the remains in those piles that were presented to us on the left side, we cleaned those up and we removed the mud and the dirt and the debris. And what you can see is what is left. What we found was multiple vertebral columns.
Are these those?
Yes. Loops of small bowel that are on the far left of the blue board. And then also small pieces of cartilage and bone that are on the far right of the blue board. And then off to the right, off of the blue board, you can see there's 3 distinct large pieces of bone. So one of those is the right pelvis with attached portion of the right femur. One of them is the left pelvis with attached portion of the left femur. And one of them is the sacrum.
Can you just define for the jury what the sacrum is?
So the sacrum essentially is a bone at the just at the end of your lower back, and that's where the right and the left pelvic bones associate with. So it's part of your pelvis.
Can you tell the jury what you observed in 177F?
So this is essentially bag 1 of 3. It's labeled, you can see. This is everything else that remains. After we sifted through and found the bones, this is all of the dirt and mud and rocks that remained.
In 177G?
So if you remember within the black body bag, there were two brown body bags. One of them was burial site. So this was what was in that bag to the right. It came in a tinfoil container, and there were multiple small collections of bones and charred bones and other debris.
And what did you observe in 177H?
So the last photograph that you just saw, so this is after sifting through that and cleaning things up, this is what we found. So again, there were two charred vertebral column bones on the far left. There were, and then numerous small charred blackened or white bones that really were unrecognizable. They were too small and they were too much fire artifact to tell what kind of bone they were.
And what did you observe in 177I?
So this is the second black body bag that we received. You can see on the far left, it's actually labeled 2 of 3 suspected female.
And 177J?
Again, this is a body lock or a sill that's intact. Again, we always take photographs of this to make sure it's intact for evidence preservation.
And 177K?
This is just a better photograph showing how it was labeled, the 2 of 3 suspected female.
Can you describe what you observed in 177M?
So when we opened up the body bag, this is what we saw. One thing that stands out immediately, at least to us, was there was a green plastic material that's located centrally within the debris and the skeletal remains.
Doctor, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry. Again, without the benefit of a laser pointer, is this where you're referring to the green?
Yes. And when we were able to pull that out and clean it, it was a melted green bucket. And then the rest of what you see is a collection of human remains, including bones, soft tissue. The organs were found in this bag as well.
Mm, 1770, what did you observe there?
So similar to bag 1 of 3, in addition to the human remains that were in the bag, there were 2 additional bags within the body bag. One was a brown paper bag on the far left, and the other was a clear plastic bag that contained a brown paper bag with human remains in it.
Doctor, what did you observe in 177P?
So this is a photograph of the largest portions of the skull that we found in the top. That top piece, that is the frontal bone and portion of the orbits. On the left side is a large piece of skull bone. Obviously, both of them are blackened and charred and crumbly. And then the bottom is a portion of the mandible and maxilla, and you can still make out some teeth. They're partially charred and there's blackened material partially covering them.
Are you aware if any attempts were made during the autopsy to identify these remains through teeth and dental?
Yes, we had a forensic odontologist come to our office on the day of the autopsy to try and identify Tylee via dental comparison of antemortem records that were requested, and the postmortem dental x-rays.
Was that conclusive?
Yes, the forensic odontologist was able to make a positive identification based on dental x-rays.
Detective, can you identify what you saw in 177Q?
So as I stated, within bag 2 of 3, that was the bag where the organs were found that were identifiable. This is a photograph of the heart, which is right in the middle, and then the 2 lungs, which are on the right and left side. It's difficult to identify them. This isn't what heart and lungs typically look like. They're obviously charred. Portions of them are burned away and significantly shrunken as well.
Just for the clarification of the jury, again, without a laser pointer, are these areas the lungs?
Correct.
And this portion is the heart, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall about the size that was when you received it?
They were very small. My best estimate would be they're probably a quarter of the size that they typically are.
And if you can identify what you observed in 177S?
So in all cases, even if the organs are charred and shrunken, and we still examine them. So these are essentially sections that I've taken of the heart and lungs, and they've been laid out.
If you can identify what you observed in 177T?
So as I mentioned earlier, heart and both lungs were found, and we also found 1 kidney. So this is one of the kidneys, and you can see it's blackened and charred, and some of it has been burned away.
If you can explain for the jury what was happening during 177V.
So in bag 2 of 3, if you remember, there was that large collection of human remains. So after we clean them off and clean off the dirt and all the other debris, this is what we found. So in bag number 2, I already stated a lot of the bones that we found, but in bag number 2, we found most of the skull bones, most of the vertebral column, the sternum, portions of ribs. We also found the clavicles, as well as multiple long bones from the upper and lower extremities, and some foot bones as well. Now, again, these were not intact, pretty looking bones. They were partially burned away, they were crumbly, they were blackened. But this is what we essentially found after we cleaned everything up.
And if you can describe what you saw on 177X?
Yeah, so this is within bag number 2. This is one of the additional brown paper bags found within the body bag. And you can see there's multiple charred small pieces of bone. Some of them appear to be foot bones, and some of them are unidentifiable.
You can identify when what you observe in 177Z.
So this was bag 3 of 3 that we received in a brown paper bag, as labeled remains of suspected female.
And 177AA.
So within that large paper bag, there are 5 additional smaller brown paper bags that were sealed and labeled. Each of these smaller brown paper bags contained small fragments of charred bone.
And 177BB.
So again, this is one of the 5 additional brown paper bags that contained multiple fragments of small charred bone.
And are you able to tell, I know it might be a little blurry through the ammo, what that bag is labeled?
It's labeled fire pit -B north. I can't make out the end of that. And then date 06/09/2020.
And just again, what were the contents of that bag?
They were multiple small fragments of charred, crumbly bone.
What did you observe in 177CC?
So this is the 3rd brown paper bag that was received within the larger paper bag. Again, it was sealed with tape and it was labeled. And the contents of this were again small fragments of charred, crumbly bone.
And 177DD.
This is the 4th bag that was received within the larger bag. Again, it's taped and labeled, and the contents of this also consisted of multiple small charred, crumbly bone.
And lastly, 177EE.
And this is the 5th bag that was received within the larger brown paper bag, also taped and labeled, and also containing, I believe, soft tissue and charred, crumbly bone.
Doctor, upon completion of your autopsy of Tylee Ryan, what did you do or did your lab do with her remains?
So after we collected and cleaned the bony remains, we sent all of the bones to the FBI for a detailed forensic anthropology report. We had them analyze it and produce a report.
All right. And did you review that report?
I did.
Okay, and did that report take any part in your findings or decision regarding Tylee Ryan's cause of death?
I think every information, I took into account. The report on this came back as they noted, and we noted also before, that there were sharp force markings on the bones, but they really detailed and took photographs of sharp force markings that were found on the sacrum and also on the right and left pelvic bone. So yes, it did play a role in, I did not sign out the case or come to my conclusion until I had all the information back.
Okay. And you did already answer this question yesterday, but because of the time, I would just ask you again, based on your autopsy and your training and education, what was your opinion concerning the cause of death of Tylee Ryan?
I determined the cause of death to be homicide by unspecified means.
Thank you. And just for purposes of clarity, can you remind the jury the criteria for a homicide by unspecified means?
Yes. So as we talked about yesterday, there's guidelines and criteria to go over briefly, just to remind you. One, it has to be objectively suspicious findings. So some of the examples they give is that the body is hidden out of plain view, say in a trunk of a car or in the forest and covered by branches or buried in the ground. Another example is that evidence was concealed, right? So they were lit on fire, they were dismembered, bleach was poured on them, something of that nature. So for criteria number one, this case clearly falls into that, fitting both of those criteria. For number two, it's the autopsy doesn't show an obvious cause of death or a better explanation for the cause of death. And the two examples they give there is, one, you have an intact body, you're able to examine it, look at all the organs, and you can't come up with the cause of death. The other example is that there's not enough of the body there for you to determine what the cause of death is. So Tylee would fit under that category. The third criteria is toxicology. That toxicology cannot explain why the decedent is dead. In this case, there was nothing in Tylee's toxicology where I felt I could explain her death. And then the fourth criteria is more based on history and some of the circumstances surrounding the death, the medical records. And we went over Tylee's medical records yesterday, and I didn't think there was a good explanation why otherwise young, healthy teenager would be dead. So those are the guidelines and the criteria I used to come to my conclusion.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this point, I have no further questions.
All right, before you step away from the podium there, Mr. Wood, I do just want to note on the record the exhibits that were admitted. We referenced them as 176A through MM and 177A through EE. And I will note there are certain portions that are not included in. I guess what I'm saying is there are some missing letters within the sub exhibits in what I'm seeing with my courtesy copies.
Your Honor, we initially had more pictures and then limited what we were going to show to the jury based on what needed to be shown to explain the testimony.
Okay, so this might be tedious for a moment, but in order to keep the record clear, I'd like to go just read in individually those and make sure they track with the state's actual exhibits. so that we do have the record of what was admitted on those. So starting with 176. We've got A, 176B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, X, Y. Then we've got 176B, B, C, C, D, D, E, E, F, F, G, G, H, H, I, J, J, L, L, and M, M.
In your honor, is that the court's courtesy copy or the exhibit copy?
That's the court's courtesy copy.
Okay. Did the court have 176 AA?
We do have AA. I may have misread that. So AA is also in there.
And it sounded like there was one missing, BB.
BB is there also.
Okay.
On 177. Maybe it'd be easier to just say I had A through EE, and the ones I saw were not included. If you went alphabetically, would be there was no L, R, U, W, or Y. And also no N.
That tracks with the copy I have, your honor. And again, there were some photographs that we deemed unnecessary to put on, but they'd already been marked.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify so that neither the jurors nor somebody looking at the record was wondering where those were. They were not included or admitted. So thanks for addressing that. That will conclude then the direct examination of Dr. Warren. Mr. Pryor, once you're ready, you can go to the podium and conduct cross-examination.
Good morning, Dr. Warren.
Good morning.
As part of your review of the anthropology report, did you note that there were some canine bites of any time on any parts of the remains of Tylee?
I did not notice that on my examination, but I'd probably leave that up to the anthropologist.
Now, you talked previously about bruising and that you do a cut to determine whether or not it was actual bruise or not an actual bruise. But isn't it true there's really no way to determine on any bruise when the bruise occurred, is there?
It's difficult to get exact timing on a bruise. That is true. They've even done studies where they've looked at it under the microscope and try to, really pinpoint the time frame. And it is difficult. Some of the things you can look at are color of the bruise. So typically a fresh bruise is going to be blue, red, purple. As it gets older, it's going to turn brown, green, yellow. And then under the microscope, it usually takes several minutes for inflammation to come in. So if you take a section under the microscope and there's no inflammation, you can presumably say that it was fairly recent before the death. But yes, it is difficult to time bruises and abrasions postmortem.
So if some time had passed, and let's even say that some time had passed, and it was a situation where there was embalming fluid put in the body, and a significant amount of time had passed on bruising, would it be fair to say that at that point there'd be no way to determine what kind of bruising or how to date those bruisings?
Again, as I stated before, it's difficult to get an exact time of a bruise. You can give a time frame. I mean, there's definitely a difference between a fresh bruise and a bruise that's a week old, right? By the look at it under the microscope. In this particular case, on the arms, I took sections of the bruising and looked under the microscope. And what I saw was hemorrhage and no inflammation.
Okay.
So
So
to me, what that means is that it was, probably right around, close to around the time that JJ passed away, because you do need some time for inflammation to come in. But I did not see that on JJ.
okay.
And Dr. Warren, would you maybe just pull that microphone down about 2 or 3 inches downwards? If it's more under your mouth, I think it picks it up better.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Thank you.
But again, in general, when you're talking about bruising, one of the immediate ways to determine the age of a bruise is that if, let's say, a bruise was brown or brownish greenish, that would seem to suggest, at least generally, that that was an older bruise. Would that be fair?
That's correct.
Okay. And even if you dug into that bruise and you saw that there was hemorrhaging, that doesn't necessarily give you the ability to determine when that bruise was placed on the body or occurred. Is that fair?
I think it's fair to say it's difficult to determine the exact time of the bruise. It's more of a range.
Now you spoke about examining Tylee's medical records, and you were able to determine that she was a healthy young girl at the time that this occurred. And she was approximately how tall? Do you recall?
Well, I was unable to get a height at my examination because of the condition of the body.
But in looking at the medical records, were you able to obtain that information?
I don't remember off the top of my head how tall Tylee was.
Okay. Okay. Now, your examination cannot make a determination as to when the remains were put in the ground. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
And even in spite of the anthropologist report and your examination, the fragments that you found in the fire pit, you can't make a determination as to whether or not those were animal or human fragments in the fire pit. Is that right?
I'm not a forensic anthropologist, so
Okay.
I can't. I would not feel comfortable doing that.
Okay.
But that's the whole reason why I sent it to a specialist, a forensic anthropologist.
Okay.
So I think that's a better question for the forensic anthropologist.
And we should rely on a forensic anthropologist to make that determination. Would that be fair?
Yes,
Along with potential DNA evidence?
I think DNA specialists
Okay.
should make determination on DNA.
Do you have a recollection of when the date of these 2 autopsies took place? Specific date?
Yes. So June 11th, 2020.
And the one you said took over a week, so that would have extended on through the 17th or 18th?
That's correct.
There is a term called heavy lungs. Do you recognize that term?
Heavy lungs is sometimes a term used when there's pulmonary edema. So pulmonary edema is when there's an excess amount of fluid in the lungs. You can get pulmonary edema for a wide variety of reasons. For instance, you can get it in congestive heart failure. Your heart isn't pumping as well as it should. Everything kind of backs up, fluid leaks into the lungs. You get heavy lungs, you get pulmonary edema.
And as a matter of record, you can get that pulmonary edema from the heart not operating properly. And for all practical purposes, the heart could look perfectly normal. Isn't that correct?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. There was no testimony earlier about heavy lungs. This is beyond the scope of Dr. Warren's testimony.
Sustained.
Would you agree with me that the remains that were presented to you were significantly smaller than the remains of Tylee had she been alive at that time?
Again, I think that's probably a better question for the forensic anthropologists.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's safe to say that I can say that we received Tylee and she was dismembered in multiple parts. So obviously, yes, it's going to be shorter than if she was intact, but what that means, or I'm not sure. I think I'd rather leave that question to a forensic anthropologist.
And from your examination, the vital organs were significantly smaller than what they would have been of a normal breathing human being, correct?
That's correct. That's very common in fire-related deaths, and the organs get charred. They shrink. They shrink and they lose weight.
Judge, I don't think I have anything else. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Any redirect from the state?
Just very briefly, Your Honor. Doctor, you were asked about the dating of bruises.
Yes.
Can bruising be considered a form of trauma?
Yes.
And in a situation in which you viewed the remains of J.J. Vallow, would you be surprised to find bruising on that body?
I think any bruising or any injuries in a case like this is very significant.
That's it, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. That'll conclude then testimony of Dr. Warren. We'll make sure the exhibits are given to the clerk here. And is Dr. Warren going to be recalled, do you think, at any point by the state?
Your Honor, it's not likely. I guess it's possible in rebuttal, but so I guess the state would just keep them under subpoena for the time being.
Okay, so Dr. Warren, since you're under subpoena, there's an exclusionary order prohibiting you from viewing testimony. This case is available to see streamed live or here in the courtroom, so please don't do anything to view any testimony in case you are recalled or until you are advised you've been released from any subpoena in the court.
Okay.
Thank you for your testimony. Go ahead and step down.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, if I may, I believe there are certain portions of testimony Dr. Warren would be allowed to watch if they were presented.
Okay,
Judge, could
And
we,
and we
approach-
can clear that up later.
yeah, that's,
could we have a sidebar on this?
yeah, and I'll just, before we have sidebar, point out that's a proper argument Mr. Woods brought up, that the exclusionary order does not necessarily apply at times in certain aspects to what are considered expert witnesses. So you can go ahead and step down. We'll have a sidebar and then you can call the next witness, the state. And who will the next witness be?
Your Honor, the state needed just a moment with regards to the next witness as well and was actually going to ask for a sidebar.
Okay, let's have that sidebar.